For that introduction. For those of you who came in late, we apologize for the air conditioner. We don't really know what's going on there, but appreciate you sitting through this. Hopefully we can resolve that quickly. Again, my name is Steven Kaplan. For those of you who don't know me, I've been coming to this church for a number of years. I'm originally from Augusta. I attended Georgia Tech. I have a degree in chemical engineering. I worked in industry for a number of years. I was out of California for a while. I worked here at Savannah Riverside. Eventually I decided to move into business. Ran and operated the Sunshine Bakery here in Augusta. And then also during that time, I sold that a few years ago. During that time I also worked with Positive Image Awareness Center, where I helped individuals and groups with confidence building, stress reduction, meditation, ascension, forgiveness, as well as other things. I've become a certified radical forgiveness coach, and I've been doing that for a number of years now. I'd like to begin with one of my favorite quotes from the New Testament. This is Luke 6:27, and this is Jesus talking. But I say to you who are listening, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those that curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. And to him who strikes you on the one cheek, offer the other also. And it goes on. We'll come back to this later. But I'd really like to focus on this idea of loving your enemy. To me, that's a fascinating concept, and quite frankly, it doesn't make any sense from the physical world point of view. From the civilization that we live in, loving your enemy is insane. Your enemy is somebody that you don't like, that you're afraid of, someone that perhaps wants to destroy you or kill you. So how could we possibly even think about loving an enemy? And yet, Jesus was a genius in this concept. Because from a spiritual point of view, which we'll talk more about that later, this makes perfect sense. And of course you know that if you love your enemy, you don't have an enemy anymore. So that the enemy dissolves. How do you get there? Because the reality that we live in is that's just not true. It's so hard to even conceive how I would even start to do that. And I believe the best starting place is with forgiveness. To me, if you have an enemy, that means that that individual entity has done something that you don't like. And so there may be a level of forgiveness for you to that person or entity. And then also vice versa. You may have done things that they don't like, and they would also have to forgive. So it seems like Jesus is really pointing to this idea of forgiveness. To beginning to, how would you apply that in the world? And how would you really make the changes that are needed for us? To me, this gets right to the heart of our own survival. How will we survive? And Jesus was trying to teach us. But you know, it doesn't seem like we paid much attention, does it? Not when we look at the world. There's another very famous quote, also from the New Testament. Matthew 6:9. I know you all know this. Hopefully you've heard it. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And of course it goes on. This is the Lord's Prayer. We're going to say this later in the service. We say it every service. In fact, this prayer is involved in all Christian churches. Emmett Fox, perhaps you've read Emmett, he's written about an interpretation of this Lord's Prayer. He talks a lot about it. One of the things that Emmett says is that it is the common denominator in all Christian churches. Every one, without exception, uses the Lord's Prayer. And perhaps it's the only ground on which they all meet. Now, to me, that is amazing. Because here, every Christian church, by definition, follows Jesus, right? And this is the only thing that we have in common? This one prayer? Emmett analyzes this, and in his analysis of the forgiveness part, he says, quote, "You must forgive everyone who has ever hurt you if you want to be forgiven yourself." End quote. In other words, according to Emmett Fox, it's not an option. We must forgive. And if you look at the Lord's Prayer, forgiveness is the only action word in the prayer. It's the only thing that you are supposed to do. So therefore, it must be incredibly important. Because Jesus, he thought a lot about this prayer. According to Emmett Fox, he analyzes the whole thing. He said it's a very, very interesting prayer. It teaches us about it. But every Christian denomination uses this prayer, and therefore every single one of them, all Christians, should be very forgiving, right? Doesn't that make sense? And yet it doesn't seem to be the reality of our world. In fact, Christian denominations, a lot of them don't get along with each other. We used to kill each other for something, which is to me just bizarre and amazing. But why? Why don't we have a world of forgiveness? If this great teacher, Jesus, is the most influential leader ever, he has affected this planet in so many ways. Our calendar is based on him. And we seem to not even pay attention to that. Well, the problem's really simple. Forgiveness is too hard to do. At least everybody thinks it is. I think it's very hard. I don't want to even think about it. And if it ever happens, it's going to take a long time for me to get over this. I just can't do it. Why is it so hard? Well, it's a basic thing. The reason it's so hard is because the reason you have to forgive is because something bad happened. Somebody or some entity did something bad to you. And it upsets you. And you have these emotions. Something bad happened. Now, you read the prayer, you follow Jesus and whoever, but most people, I believe, really want to be forgiven. And they want to forgive. I think everybody does in their heart. But they can't do it. The reason is real simple. Because even though you want to be forgiven, you still believe that something else, something bad happened. You have the two conflicting beliefs inside you, and you can't resolve those. So even though you're wanting to forgive, and you may say it over and over again, it doesn't happen for you. But There is an easier way. We talk about forgiveness, we talk about bad things happening. I think most people would agree that if they look back in their life and look at the bad things that happen, sometimes, almost many times, they can look back and see those bad things and think about it and say, you know, maybe there was a reason for that happening. Maybe I'm wiser now. Maybe I'm stronger now. Maybe I'm in a better relationship now. Maybe everything is going differently than it was, than I thought I should do in the past, but now I feel better about it. So, you know, when I look at those bad things, yeah, I can see there might have been a reason for that. So this concept, what I'm calling radical forgiveness, by the way, there's a book written by Colin Tipping. I can talk about this, but you can read the book. But in radical forgiveness, that's what we say, that when bad things happen in the past, that it happened for a reason. So radical forgiveness takes that concept, but it takes it one more step. And that step is enormous, incredibly radical. That step is that not only do some things happen for a reason, everything happens for a reason. Everything. Now, here that's an easy belief system. We kind of believe that anyway. In fact, it's kind of like a bumper sticker these days. But people can say it as much as they want, and they don't really believe it. Because it's a very hard belief for the human being to really integrate in their being. We just can't. We can't, because there's so many bad things that are happening in our world, so many terrible things that happen. And I don't want to talk about all those terrible things, but I do want to say that there is a way to forgive. And when you have this belief system, or actually this process, you don't actually have to believe it. You just have to do the process. And you don't have to believe that it was perfect. You just have to have a willingness to consider the possibility that there might be just a tiny bit possibility of perfection in the situation. Even though you can't see it, even though you may never see it, that's okay. All you have to do is do the process. And the process is really simple. It's step by step. It's just a worksheet. I have an example of a worksheet. It's just 2 pages. All you have to do is fill this out, and it works. There are only 5 stages to go through. I'll explain those stages. But the basic premise, as I said, is a willingness that you want to forgive, and also you need to have some kind of belief in a higher power. So those 2 are the basic prerequisites for it. And when you do that, you make room for a miracle to occur, for the forgiveness to occur. The title of this worksheet is called Making Room for the Miracle. So the first step of doing this process is to tell the story. Now, everybody has a story. And when something bad happens to you, you really need to tell that story about what happened. This sounds simple enough, right? You can tell your story. The problem we have, most of us have, is nobody's listening. You say, well, I got a friend, I got this acquaintance, I can tell that they'll listen to my story. Well, maybe they will. But quite frankly, most people that are listening to your story, you know what they're doing? What they're really doing is they're thinking about their own story. Sometimes they'll even interrupt you. So wait a minute. Let me tell you about my divorce. It was so terrible. What they're doing is they're trying to make you feel better, aren't they? Well, if you see how bad I got it, then you'll feel better, right? Won't you? No. Because you can't tell your story. You realize they're not even looking. They don't want to hear your story. And they don't. They really don't. It's not that they're bad people. It's just people don't want to hear this stuff. So you need to have your story heard. And you need to have it validated. That somebody has heard that story and that, yes, that really happened for you. And there's different ways to do that. But the second step, which usually begins when you're telling the story, is to feel the feelings. Everybody has feelings. In fact, feelings are not bad. Some people are afraid of feelings. They're afraid of negative feelings and emotions. But you are supposed to be feeling. You are a human. Humans, by definition, are feeling beings. That's what we do. We feel things. But when bad things happen, we want to take those feelings and stuff them down inside of us. We don't want anybody to know we have these feelings. But it's very important that we feel these feelings and that we process them. You can feel your feelings and express them all the time, but if you don't process it can be dangerous. What do you do with that incredible anger or that incredible sadness? Where do you take that? And so this process, this very simple process, takes you through your feelings, helps you process and you come out on the other side, on the positive side. But until you get there, you've got to know what they are, you've got to discover the feelings, and then you've got to really express them. Again, those are two very simple things that anybody can do, naturally. The third stage of radical forgiveness is to collapse the story. And this is where we begin to see the possibility that there might be imperfection, because we look for things about our story that are repeating or synchronicity. So there's something special happening, something unusual, something that happened over and over again in my life. How is that possible? How is it that I had this situation and then I have it again and then I have it again? It's almost like someone is trying to teach me something. And in fact, we are. Spirit is trying to show us something, but it takes us a while to recognize that. If we can recognize that there's some spirit involved in the process, it helps the story itself to collapse within itself. And we begin to look at things a little bit differently, hopefully. And then all you've got to do is express a willingness to consider the possibility that there is a perfection in it. And the shift begins to happen. Then the next two stages are reframe and integration. In the reframe, the problem that some of us have is that our story is our whole life. And if we start collapsing the story around us, we don't know what to do. So we can reframe the whole story into a new frame of reference and begin to see the positive aspects of what we're doing. Begin to process those emotions, to truly let them go. Begin to see the other person, the perpetrator, is not necessarily a bad individual, but someone who has come here to help us learn something, to help us develop. So you have these, I won't get into the integration too much either right now, but the integration is just putting it into your body, into your heart, and really taking this as part of your essence when you're done with this. And giving you this new frame of reference and then saying, this is the way you can live. You can be this way. You don't have to be the victim anymore. Now, it is true that sometimes you have to do this process more than once. That's okay. And it is true that it can take a little bit of time, especially when you first learn the process. So sometimes it's good to have somebody help you. Now, I'm a coach, and I'm not the only coach in this process, but there are many coaches out there, and a coach can help you through the steps. And particularly the steps that I've described, where you need somebody listening, you need somebody to help you recognize your emotion, and then perhaps to help see some of the perfection in the situation. Now, here at Unity, I think we're all really good at all this kind of stuff, so we don't really need a coach. We can do it ourselves. But you know, you really want to think about that. What is a coach? To me, a coach is someone that can really help you to become a high-performance individual. Think about sports. Think about golf, for example. The best golfers in the world, they are on the top of the golfing world, and every one of them has a coach. The best baseball players, the best hitters, greatest home run hitters, they have batting coaches. Why? Why does somebody that's so good, the best in the whole world, why would they still have a coach? A coach can see things you can't see. A coach can help you to develop better. They're on the top of the world, they want to stay there. I personally think that unity should be a leader in the forgiveness process, because I don't see it happening with any other Christian denomination. Maybe I'm mistaken. I don't know a lot about Christianity. But I think we can be excellent. Each and every one of us could become excellent at forgiving and help others around us. Now, I could talk a long time about forgiveness. I could tell lots of stories. I've seen people change. I've helped people change. I've seen it for myself. I've seen other people do it. And it is an amazing thing. Also, it's a very healthy thing. So, again, Colin Tippin wrote the book, and I was personally trained by Colin. And when he tells a story about what happened, he was working with cancer patients. Spent a lot of time working with them, and they found that the commonality with these cancer patients was the lack of forgiveness. They all carried a great deal of resentment around. And when they worked on that forgiveness for them, it tended to help them. Sometimes physically. And Colin continued to do these radical forgiveness workshops, and what he would say is, when he did these workshops, he wasn't focused on cancer patients anymore. But what he said was that cancer patients would usually show up, at least one or two people in the group had cancer. So he continued to work with this process and help people. And it's a process that really does work for those kinds of things. But for me, it's really exciting because what I see happening with this radical forgiveness is helping us to recognize the concept of oneness. In other words, we're all part of the same one. And that's a very hard concept to grasp. In our principles here at Unity, we have those are kind of part of that we are part of the same one. We're all part of God. So this process helps us to see that the individual that we are forgiving has certain qualities that we call bad. And what we do is begin to recognize that those bad qualities in that other individual that is upsetting us so much are actually within us. We are part of the same one. So it goes back to what we said with this Luke 27. If I can finish that, the very end of that quote, where Jesus is talking. But love your enemies, do good and lend, not hoping for any return, and your reward shall be great. And you shall be children of the Most High. For he is kind towards the ungrateful and evil. Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. If we want to create a world where it's peaceful, we're going to have to learn how to forgive. And I believe that if we can forgive, then we can accomplish this goal of loving your enemy. If we start to recognize that the oneness that we are is throughout the entire planet, if we hate or see somebody as an enemy, that person is part of us. if we kill somebody, we are killing a part of us. And when you realize that, it changes your whole dynamic, your whole awareness of life. So I'd like to move into a quiet time now. And as I do, I want to begin with an affirmation. And this is from the integration part of this worksheet. And as you hear my words, I want you to imagine that you're actually, in your own mind, voicing these words for yourself. I completely forgive and accept myself as a loving, generous, and creative being. I release all need for emotions, to hold on to the emotions, and ideas of lack and limitation connected to the past. I withdraw my energy from the past and release all barriers against the love and abundance that I know I have in this moment. I create my life, and I am empowered to be myself again, to unconditionally love and support myself, just the way I am, in all my power and magnificence.